Hello everybody and welcome to this monthly bullet journal plan with me video. My name is Anna and today we are going to create this romantic Paris inspired monthly theme. I'll post the final flip through of my February layout on my Instagram as I always do in the end of the month, but today we have a lot to go through here, so let's get started right away. So I started everything by creating a cover spread for this March layout, and the first drawing this month is this pretty ambitious Eiffel Tower city landscape. Also, you could always leave many things out of this picture and maybe just focus on the Eiffel Tower if that would feel better for you. But anyway, I created this on a separate piece of my Canson watercolor paper, but instead of watercolors, I actually went with my Copic markers this month, which is probably the first time I'm using these on my channel. And if you don't own something like this, you could easily switch them up with brush pens or just go with a totally different technique like watercolors, gouache, colorful pencils, or anything you want. But since I happen to have a pretty good collection of these just sitting on my shelf, I decided to change it up and use these for once. However, before we start any form of coloring, the first step is to create a pencil sketch that will give us an opportunity to figure out the shapes and details of this whole picture. I definitely advise to look through some pictures, and I kind of followed this one in particular. I don't have that much experience drawing city views like this, so I feel like it's exceptionally hard to try to create correct angles and perspective without any guide. I think especially the perspective and dimensions of everything was pretty challenging in this one, so that's also why I really took my time with this pencil sketch. And even if you're following a reference, you can always choose to leave something out and also add and change some details. I did that here as well, just to give the drawing my own twist and leave out some stuff that would have been pretty complicated to draw by hand, especially in this size. I started everything from the easiest part of this painting, which is this sky. I just laid down the lightest possible wash with watercolors, and that was pretty much it. I didn't use watercolors for any other part of this picture, but this kind of light wash is just so much easier to do with the watercolors. But yeah, now that we have a little bit better idea of what is going on here, I finally took out the Copic markers and started from some of the lightest colors I own. I don't have that much experience with these either, so I'm not an expert by any means, but I think starting from the lightest colors and then slowly layering more colorful and darker tones works pretty well. And if you've been planning to purchase some of these, I definitely pick at least a few light neutral colors because they are a really good starting point for many different kinds of drawings. In this picture as well, I mainly used my warm and cool gray tones and then some neutral earthy ones. And if you're looking for the specific colors, I will leave all of them to the description bar. I think the main difference with these and let's say the typical Tombow brush pens is that these markers are alcohol based, whereas the brush pens are usually water based. It's actually pretty difficult to find paper that these markers work with because they bleed through almost any paper. In the end, you can see that they even bled through this thick watercolor paper a little bit, and they are definitely not suitable to use in any bullet journals, which is kind of a shame since I own so many pretty tones in these. But then the good point of this is that they blend together pretty well and also create this pretty smooth appearance, which makes these very versatile for different types of drawings. I think the hardest parts for me in this picture were definitely the smaller buildings and also randomly creating a classy appearance to the door and the table. I tried to add some reflection stripes and give the details a little bit blurrier behind the classy surface, but I think I probably didn't do the best job at that. But then in the city, it was difficult to draw the line to the amount of details I wanted to add there. I basically tried to keep everything very loose and just added a few different tones of color there. Then in my reference picture, there were also some brown winter trees around the Eiffel Tower, so I kind of tried to add some of those, but I don't know if it worked that well. In the end, I guess in a picture like this, you don't really need to draw every single detail perfectly, and I think it's much more important to pay attention to the overall shapes and also the lights and shadows, and then some details mainly in the front part of the painting than further in the distance. So as you can see, I kept adding the intensity of the colors for a good while here, and I'd say this whole drawing took at least 5 hours for me in real life. I also wanted everything to have this warm, almost a little bit pinkish brown tone, because it was kind of the color palette I had in mind for the rest of the theme as well. And then only in the very end did I take out my black micron and added just a few finishing touches here and there. It's pretty much impossible to create any small details with the markers since they create those softer blurry strokes. So adding some black and white details as a last step is definitely the way to go. And one of my struggles is that I often end up drawing too many lines with the black pen since I'm a little bit more familiar with that style. So I tried really hard to only add some definition to the shadowy areas and then some other places that I think needed it, like some parts of the Eiffel Tower and also especially the flowers. Then as a very last step, I did the same thing with a white gel pen. I also tried to kind of straighten some of the wonky lines in the balcony door and add some highlights to some other places as well. This pen I was using probably wasn't the best for this job, and I think maybe using a white wash would have worked a little bit better. But anyway, that finally finished up the first illustration of this month. I know I probably didn't do the best job at explaining everything step by step, so if you have some questions, please leave them to the comments and I'll do my best to answer all of them. But then for those of you who are interested, I'll also add this drawing and this whole theme as well to my online shop. They should be up there in a day or two. I'll definitely need to touch up some things before putting it on sale, but luckily all that kind of magic is possible on a computer. But anyway, after attaching this drawing to my journal with double-sided tape, I focused on the page next to it where I wrote the monthly title and added some final details. I used this cursive minimal font here on the first page, but then under the March title, I decided to add one of my favorite quotes by Hemingway, again to keep up with the Paris theme. And for once, I actually wrote it on a computer and printed it out on a sticker paper to create a cleaner appearance here. You could of course leave a little bit more space here and write everything by hand if this method seems too troublesome. But then I finished this whole spread by writing the March calendar here that we can use later when setting up the rest of this theme. So yeah, I know we've been here for a while, but luckily the next spread will be a bit less time consuming and it will be for our monthly calendar and monthly overview. I started this page with a new style of lettering, so instead of going in with the same cursive font we did on the previous one, I decided to create this more typewriter-like font that I think really suited the mood of this theme. This font is called American Typewriter. It's a very basic font that you can find from Google or on your computer if you want to see how to write each letter. And I traced the letters first with a pencil because I think it's just much easier like that. And I didn't color the letters fully. You can see me leaving out these little spots, and I did it to add a little bit more texture and just a more smudgy look, I guess. There are actually a lot of stamps out there to create exactly this kind of look, and I sometimes get comments asking why I don't use more stamps or stickers on my videos, and there is really no other reason than that I just like to show you guys how to create as much by yourself as I can. If you happen to own any stamps or stickers, feel free to use them and probably save some time. And this is nothing against other bullet journal channels that maybe use stamps or stickers. It doesn't mean they are not good artists or anything like that. It's just more my preference. But moving on from that, so under the title, I set up this very simple vertical calendar. I usually always go with a horizontal calendar, but decided to switch it up this month. I used this Tombow brush pen, which is in the color Sand. I feel like this is a color that I use in almost every single monthly theme. And then I decided to add the vertical strokes in the calendar with this light gray brush pen. And it just added a little bit softer look to the lines instead of just drawing everything with the same black pen. Then after the calendar, I just added these quick lines to the top and bottom with this beautiful muted pink color I found from my Archer and Olive acrylograph pens. I will list and link all the products I'm using in the description and also give all the specifics of these tools. But I think this color suited this theme perfectly, so I used it kind of as an accent color on many of these pages. Then after the calendar, we can move on to the next page. I kept this one very simple as well and basically left all the room of this page for just random notes I might have during the month. You could use this section for anything you like, and just to create something more interesting here, I decided to go with this street sign inspired title here. So I first drew a very quick pencil sketch. I was figuring out the size and the swirl directions for a while, and then went over everything with my black pen and then with a layer of watercolors as well. I went with this little bit bluish gray color. You could go with something a little bit more monochromatic as well if you like. And I kept the outlines of the sign a little bit darker so that the background for the text is not too dark. And yeah, then I just wrote notes here, and that's it for this cute little title idea for this theme. I didn't know what to create on the bottom corner. It looked kinda empty, but I also wanted to have a lot of space on this spread to write any random thoughts. So after thinking about it for a while, I decided to go with this super tiny color palette here. For me, a color palette is usually something I go with when I don't know what else to draw. It adds something to the page, but also takes like 5 seconds to create. But now that our simple calendar spread is done, we can move on in our setup. And next, I usually like to create something to help with the monthly planning and setting some priorities. You'll see me switching between the typewriter font and the cursive one all throughout this theme because I think they went together pretty nicely. But after writing this title, I just added 2 very simple sections on this page because I mainly wanted to focus on the drawing in the bottom corner and keep the rest of this page more minimal. So firstly, I left some room for myself to consider the main focus for this month. And the second, smaller section will be for the 15th check-in that I often use to check in the middle of the month and see if I'm still following the focus areas I previously set up. But now let's jump to this corner decoration, and I went with this kind of old style street lamp. I started again by sketching everything out with a pencil, and this one will be simple enough to draw directly to the notebook. I wanted this lamp to also have a street sign here, so I sketched it out too, and then started to color and shade the lines with a black pen. Then when it comes to the coloring, even though these are fully black, I think still leaving some texture here and there will help to keep all the different shapes and details apart. And I also tried my best to keep my strokes in the same direction to create a little bit tidier end result. You could add even more decoration elements to your lamp, but I decided to keep this one a bit more on the simpler side. Then after the lamp itself was done, I finished this illustration by adding some messy shapes behind it with watercolors to resemble maybe leaves or some pink flowers. You really don't need to be too specific here, and I often think that the messier it looks, the more realistic everything ends up seeming. I really liked this page in all its simplicity, but now let's move on to the right page where I just set up 4 boxes for the full weeks in March. I really liked using these weekly sections in the past months. I often fill these in the beginning of the month and then kind of use them as my guide while trying to navigate through the weeks. So I mainly use these for the most important things and also try to leave a lot of room for changes that will definitely happen later, but still somehow having the whole monthly plan written out like this really helps to make sure you have time to actually complete everything. I tried to copy the style of the monthly calendar here to keep everything cohesive. So I used the same colors and also the double underline under the title section. Writing the typewriter font in this smaller size was a bit trickier, but it doesn't need to be perfect by any means. And then I'll probably write some weekly overview here in these boxes and then list a few specific tasks that I can then later move to the weekly pages. But that's it for the monthly planning section, and now let's move on to set up a long forgotten habit tracker. I haven't included one in a while, but recently I've had a few new things I've tried to maintain, so I thought a page like this would help me out with that. We know the drill with the font by now, and I also added the same double line with the pink pen. And then after the title, I divided this page into these 6 small sections. Again, I used these 2 neutral brush pens to create this cute doodly style that I think matched the typewriter font really well. And then the habits themselves are mainly stuff to help me maintain a better work-life balance. I'm someone who really struggles with this. I know many of you must feel the same way, especially now that more people are still working from home. I feel like even though I try to plan everything beforehand as much as possible, I still always manage to find myself trying to finish projects in the last possible minute. And then I get these crazy work days in a row that really burn me out. So it's definitely something I'll try to keep improving. If you have any tips for me, I'd love to read those in the comments. But yeah, I kind of messed up these titles here. This is exactly what happens when I don't write stuff down with a pencil beforehand. But I try to just ignore it and move on. So the next page will definitely be more of a decoration page, since I didn't have a need for any specific functional one anymore. So I decided to go with another marker drawing on the Paris city view, and this time I kept it much more on the ground level. I'm actually so happy this theme allowed me to experiment with these building drawings, since it's something I've been interested in for a while. I follow a few people on Instagram that focus more on architecture style drawing, and I always think it's so fascinating and something I haven't really experimented that much with. So it was definitely a fun challenge this month. So I started everything here in a very similar way than with the first picture. First I created a good pencil sketch and focused especially on the perspective again. So for example on the angles of the lines and how the windows and other details get smaller and smaller the further away you get from the front part of the drawing. Then I started to layer some warm tones again. My idea was to create almost a look of a warm Instagram filter over this street view. So I really tried to find some warm tones to achieve that. It was again really hard to keep all the details sharp, so I feel like some of the lines definitely were a little bit blurry here, but you can always clean those up with a thinner pen later. In the original picture, there was a Chanel store here, but I went ahead and changed it to ice cream because why not? Again, I think especially the final white and black details really brought everything together here, and especially helped with all these flowers. But now that this small street view was done, I glued it in the notebook as I did with the first one, and then finished this spread with one of these word definition thingies I've often come across on Pinterest. So this is apparently a French word that I definitely cannot pronounce. Is it flaneur or something like that? But apparently it has the meaning of a person aimlessly strolling around the city to experience it. All my French viewers, let me know if this is accurate. I'd be really interested to know if this is actually the meaning of this word or if it's just amped up to create a pretty post. But that finally finishes this spread, and we only have two simpler ones left, so let's move on to those. And first I'm gonna create a weekly layout for the first 2 weeks of March. I've recently really enjoyed using these 2 weeks in one spreads because they are fast and easy to set up, and if you use the space well, I feel like it's also enough to write down everything you need. So I started with the daily task list section that I use to write my to-do lists for each day. This is personally enough space for me because I've really tried to cut down the amount of things I write down here. But if you feel like you need more space, I think you could easily give more rows for each day here and turn this spread into 1 week layout. But yeah, as you can see, nothing crazy or super special here. I thought the colors and the typewriter letters were an easy way to connect the style of this spread with the rest of the theme without taking too much time. Then in the middle here, there's some space that you could use however you need. I decided to add a content list for myself. I definitely need a place like this where I can see what I've filmed, edited and posted to keep track of everything. And then the second section I often use is the daily meal planner, where I can plan the lunch and dinner for each day I'm in charge of cooking here. But that's pretty much it for this simple 2-week layout. And now I'm flipping over one page that I'll use for the other 2 weeks. And then lastly, we'll finish the March layout with a monthly reflection spread. I created a bigger cursive title here again, and then followed it with some questions and things that will help me to review the whole month and hopefully to clear my mind a bit and serve as a good reflection moment. I sometimes feel like it's a bit tedious to fill pages like these, but in the end it always helps to refocus and get some things off your mind. I usually write about things that happen to be on my mind or something that was present during the specific month. And often I also consider some things that were hard that I should maybe focus more on the future. This time I also added a section to look back to the yearly goals, just so I can check in if I'm still on track or if there's something I should probably take more seriously moving forward. Then every month I like to set up this small line graph where I can rate the previous month on these 5 different areas. The center line is the 0 point, and then I can give the rating to each direction. Then as the last little illustration here, I decided to draw this kind of fancy old style fence here. When I started this drawing, I imagined this more as one of those fancy balconies, but I think in the end it looked more like a fence, but I think that's okay as well. I spent some time to come up with this pattern, but I always really like to create patterns like this. I think it looks so pretty and satisfying when you have the same pattern over and over again. So again, it definitely helps to sketch everything out with a pencil, especially for the first few, so you kind of get the idea of the pattern. And maybe then, when you get the hang of it, you can just add some basic guidelines for yourself. I think I kind of ruined this a little bit by adding the watercolors in the end, but usually in this part of the monthly setup, I'm always already running out of motivation, so I just left it out like this, at least for now. Maybe I'll touch it up later. But anyway, after that, our whole March layout is finally done. This was definitely one of my favorites in a while. I really hope you guys like these romantic neutral colors as well. But other than that, if you're new here and would like to stay tuned for more journaling videos like this in the future, definitely consider subscribing. It's always very appreciated. But yeah, I think that's all for this time. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are. And see you in my next one. Bye bye.